Bolivia takes another step towards fresh elections, but mass lawmakers insist there must also be justice. Right-winger Luis Lacalle Pou becomes president-elect of Uruguay as the Broad Front candidate concedes defeat. And votes are counted in Namibia as SWAPO faces a challenge to his 21 years in government. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo and this is From the South. Bolivia's Legislative Assembly has approved the regulations for the election of members of a new Supreme Electoral Court. This was one of the steps agreed on Sunday when the de facto president, Janine Áñez, signed off on an electoral law agreed by the Assembly. The regulations were passed by over two-thirds of the lawmakers, including those of Evo Morales' MAS party. The members of the Electoral Court must be in place within 20 days, and they will then call fresh elections, probably for April or May of next year. The former Speaker of the Senate, Adriana Salvatierra, insisted the measure must go hand in hand with the investigation of human rights abuses following the coup against President Evo Morales.
We repeat very emphatically that we all believe the solution to the conflict should be peaceful and democratic, but it cannot ignore the calls for justice or forget the dead and injured. It will not be possible to celebrate democracy if there is no justice, if there are no constitutional guarantees and full respect for human rights. Social peace does not come from just democracy, but fundamentally from justice and ethics. As lawmakers, we cannot be compliant or silent, or forget the pain that the Bolivian people are feeling.
And while political agreements make progress in Bolivia, the persecution of social and political leaders tied to the government of President Evo Morales continues. Daisy Choque, the former movement towards socialism candidate for Montero, is being held in pretrial detention accused of murder, criminal association, and incitement. She was arrested while giving an interview at her home. Her lawyer says she is a political prisoner. Choque's detention comes amid numerous denunciations of human rights abuses committed by the de facto authorities following the right-wing coup after October 20th elections. The Bolivian Ombudsman Office has confirmed the death of Calixto Guanacu Aguilar, who was shot in the head by forces of repression earlier this month. Guanacu Aguilar died at the hospital, becoming the 10th person to succumb to injuries incurred in the Sencata massacre on November 19th during a military and police operation against demonstrators blocking access to a fuel depot near the city of El Alto. The president of the delegation sent by Mercosur to investigate human rights abuses in Bolivia, Cecilia Merchan, has said the killings of anti-coup protesters must be recognized if the country is to find a solution to the crisis.
There have been grave human rights abuses in Bolivia. We believe that there is a moment in which the Bolivian people are going to have to try and escape this situation, and that's something that's being argued over. An electoral calendar is something fundamental to the reconstruction. Democracy is central to this. Something else that is crucial to a democratic solution is the recognition of what has happened during this time. There has to be recognition of those killed, the 1,000 prisoners, many without reason, and also those who are exiled in embassies here and that can't leave because the government won't let them.
Earlier on, we spoke with Bolivian political analyst Nicolás Melendres. We asked him what he thinks of the full restoration of the diplomatic relations with the United States for the first time since 2009.
The ambassador of Janine Áñez, named in a special mission to the United States, it's really warning for people here in Bolivia because one of the first countries to recognize the government of Janine Áñez is the United States of America. So this is really, it's kind of strange for people here in Bolivia after maybe more than 10 years with no official relations with the United States. In fact, what we have with the United States was a good economic relation in these 13 years, but now it seems that some political interest starts to going to be seen in the next days.
The candidate of the governing Broad Front in Uruguay has conceded defeat in last Sunday's presidential election. In a tweet, Daniel Martinez said the counting of special votes had not changed the tendency shown on Sunday night. He was therefore congratulating Luis Lacalle Pou as president-elect. He said he would meet his rival on Friday. Sunday's results gave the right-wing Lacalle a lead of less than 30,000 votes, which meant no official result was possible until the special votes were counted. Small groups of Lacalle's supporters gathered to celebrate his victory in Montevideo. The right-wing leader has already been congratulated by the Venezuelan opposition figure, Juan Guaidó, and he in turn expressed his support for Guaidó. Peru is putting up its own candidate for Secretary General of the Organization of American States to stand against the incumbent Luis Almagro. Hugo de Sela Martinez is a former vice foreign minister and Peru's current ambassador to the OAS. His candidacy indicates a split within the Lima group, which Almagro helped to set up to press for regime change in Venezuela. The former president of the UN General Assembly, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who was Ecuador's foreign minister under Rafael Correa, has also confirmed she will stand. Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Scared has condemned an Al Jazeera documentary alleging the sale of diplomatic passports, labeling it a conspiracy created by the opposition. He says the false claims have been shared by the United Workers' Party for years and threatened legal action for defamation.
It was clear to me, as it will be to you, that either Linton, the UWP directly, or their foreign collaborators provided this baseless information to Al Jazeera for political reasons. People who libel me will find themselves before the courts.
Coming up after the break, an autopsy report in Colombia says a young protester who died on Monday was killed with a shotgun. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Both Mexican citizens and authorities have raised concerns after the U.S. state's President Donald Trump threatened to include Mexican drug cartels in the list of terrorist organizations. According to President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, this decision will likely have repercussions on Mexico's sovereignty.
The defense of Mexico's sovereignty has been a recurring topic during the Mexican president's morning briefings. He has long rejected any type of foreign intervention in the country's internal affairs.
We must say, cooperation, yes, intervention, no.
His words have become stronger since the U.S. president said that drug cartels will be considered terrorist organizations, a situation that could allow U.S. laws to be applied outside their own territory.
It's inconvenient and unnecessary to request direct action from the United States. That is something that we will never accept.
Reactions were quick to arrive in the Senate, in particular from the ruling party.
With Trump's words, the doors will open for the United States military to intervene in our territory. This situation does not promote peace or a good relationship between nations. This will only worsen the situation.
Washington's intention to act in Mexican territory increased after the murder of a family of Mormons who held dual nationality. The relationship between Mexico and the United States in matters of cooperation against drug trafficking changed with López Obrador's arrival in power, who has rejected any interventionism from the CIA and the DEA.
López Obrador has tried to change the Mérida initiative so that we receive productive materials instead of weapons. But this does not work for the United States, as they want to indoctrinate our security forces, because war is their business.
The Mexican government has been fighting irregular arms trafficking, which is considered to be one of the main factors of growing violence at the northern border. According to official figures, 70% of the arsenal used by criminal gangs comes from the United States.
Citizens in Chile are highlighting injuries caused by police violence during the protests against the neoliberal administration of President Sebastián Piñera. Demonstrators are condemning the high number of eye injuries caused by the police firing rubber bullets at protesters. At least 232 people have been hospitalized with serious eye injuries, a figure that is disproportionately high by international standards. It has raised concerns of deliberate malpractice on the part of security forces. At least 24 people have been killed during the demonstrations.
How has President Piñera responded to our demands? With more repression. Today in Chile, defending the right to decent pensions and wage for everyone means you lose an eye. If you go out to protest, you risk being raped, tortured, or the loss of your eyes.
Leaders of the Social Unity Platform, which has been coordinating many of the protests in Chile, have been meeting with the government. Our correspondent Leonel Retamal reports.
We are outside the Moneda presidential palace, where a meeting has just taken place between trade unionists of the Social Unity Platform and the government. One of the teachers' leaders is just explaining to some of his members what happened at the meeting, the demands put forward by the unions, not just teachers, but construction workers, dockers and other unions that make up the CUT Confederation. These are the unions that have been leading many of the protests in Chile, most recently the general strike on Tuesday this week. They say the government was prepared to listen to them, but there has been no concrete response to their demands, nor was an agenda of talks agreed. Nonetheless, this is the first such meeting between the government and the organizations that have been mobilizing after more than 40 days of the uprising. They say they raised the issue of human rights abuses, the 280 or so cases of eye injuries, the 2,600 formal complaints registered for violations of human rights. They talked about their 10-point list of social demands, including an increase in the minimum wage and the issues of pensions, education, healthcare and others. And also the question of a constitutional referendum in April. They want the government to suspend its legislative plans, which the protesters say do not correspond to their demands, but just deepen the existing neoliberal policies.
The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean has highlighted growing inequality in Chile at the launch of its Social Panorama report. The report indicates that poverty is growing in Latin America, with 30.8% of the population now living without basic needs. Extreme poverty is also on the rise at 11.8%. It also says that inequality has been underestimated in the region. The report suggests that central government spending in Latin America rose between 2011 and 2018. However, in the Caribbean, it has now dropped to pre-2014 levels. An autopsy report in Colombia says the young protester who died on Monday was killed with a 12-bore shotgun. The death of 18-year-old Dylan Cruz has been at the center of protests since he was shot by riot police at a demonstration last Saturday. He died in the hospital 2 days later. The autopsy says he suffered severe head wounds as a result of a direct hit with a shotgun pellets. As the protests continue in Colombia, social movements are demanding those responsible for his death to be brought to justice. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Hernan Tovar, has more.
This is the 8th day of marches and protests in Colombia, organized by students, teachers, and other trade unions and movements to demand that the government ends its neoliberal policies. They are protesting in particular against President Iván Duque's package of reforms to pensions, taxes, and labor rights. The students, who have played a leading role in recent days, are demanding more public spending on education and an investigation into corruption in the public universities. Today, they are holding concerts in some of the parks of Bogotá, and they are calling a march from the center of the city to the north to make their voices heard.
In spite of the difficulties caused by the economic blockade, the government of President Nicolás Maduro is stepping up efforts to ensure decent health care for everyone in Venezuela. Our correspondent went to the main heart hospital in Caracas to find out more.
The Vargas Hospital in Caracas is a benchmark for cardiovascular medicine, and all this week it is holding special sessions. Carlos Padilla came with his children from Maracay to get the treatment he needs. Here, the state supplies for free, but will cost him between $15,000 and $30,000 in a private hospital.
I came here to get my arteries unblocked, and I have to say it's a very good alternative for me, and I really believe they can help me.
The Venezuelan government is making a big effort to help people and improve the situation. The aim is to allow people to get better, in spite of the circumstances.
Cardiovascular problems account for a third of all illnesses and deaths in Venezuela. In this hospital, 240 people are receiving treatment, and 70 operations are carried out every month. In the special sessions this week, 50 patients will get surgery. Antonio Fernandez is one of them.
It's very good. They are quick and very caring.
Dr. Mauro Herrera is the head of the heart unit. He explains the impact of the blockade imposed on Venezuela by the United States.
The idea is to develop blood units throughout the country. That's the plan which is being put into practice now. But remember that we have a blockade which reduces our ability to buy spare parts and repair or maintain our equipment. This is the big challenge which the state has to get around, how to get these supplies here. And it's not just a problem with U.S. companies. All foreign companies dealing with Venezuela are sanctioned.
We know very well where all this situation comes from the United States and imperialism. This whole war is not just against Venezuela, but against all countries. Look at Chile now, and they have intervened in our sister country, Bolivia.
And the patients are not just Venezuelans. Foreigners, especially from Colombia and Ecuador, are also being treated as part of this program, a joint effort by several ministries to overcome the crisis and guarantee healthcare to all who need it.
Coming up after the break, more than 18,000 people have been displaced across Kenya due to heavy rains and flash floods. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Vote counting is underway in Namibia after polling in the country's general election ended late on Wednesday night. This critical vote will presumably shift power from the Southwest Africa's People's Party, which has ruled since independence in 1990. Namibians voted to appoint a new president and lawmakers from 11 candidates and 15 parties. President Hage Geingob is seeking re-election. Over 1 million citizens voted across the 14 regions of the country. The Electoral Commission has refused to say when provisional results will be released.
No, actually, it looks like everything went well, but it's only that most people, they were complaining about the AVM because it was like first time to use these machines. And I can see that even observers, most of the observers were also trying to be complaining a bit because we are used with their, voting of like normally, crossing and so all those things. So this was all like a new thing to us. But people, they tried their level best.
It's few of it. Where we are, maybe the people get vote until 2 o'clock. But me, because I have a small kids at home, I can't lock them in. I go sleep. But the other until they are finished. Some say they're done 4 o'clock.
More than 18,000 people have been displaced across Kenya due to heavy rains and flash floods. The government says the severe start to the rainy season has left at least 120 dead. Major roads and bridges have been damaged in West Pokot, making it more difficult to provide humanitarian aid to the affected areas. Doctors have expressed concern that diseases and other waterborne illnesses might spread. Benin has ordered the European Union's ambassador to leave the country for meddling in domestic affairs. According to authorities, Ambassador Oliver Neat was harmful to the country. While clarifying that Benin has nothing against the EU, Oliver has also been accused of constantly calling on civil society to protest against the government. Benin is not the only African country to go down the path of expelling meddlesome diplomats. Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia have also recently thrown out ambassadors. Iraqi protesters blocked roads in the southern city of Najaf after 24 people were killed by riot police during overnight demonstrations. Strikers defied a curfew that was instituted after they torched the Iranian consulate in Nasiriyah on Wednesday. Although security forces have been deployed, protesters burned tires and debris on the streets. The leader of the Spanish Podemos party has said that he hopes the country has a government by Christmas Eve. Podemos and the ruling PSOE party have agreed a coalition deal in principle, but are relying on support from other parties to form a new government.
First of all, we have to move forward with the investment of a government, and PSOE and their candidate for the presidency, Pedro Sanchez, will have to be at the head of it. Podemos and PSOE have to be capable of gathering enough support to progress with this. That's the first task, and it's not yet complete. We have to work, push for dialogue, empathy, and the left. The date is unclear. The next president of the Chamber of Deputies will have to determine that, and it could take a while because there are so many parties. As such, it's a longer process. In any case, I hope that by Christmas Eve, Spaniards have a government.
The leader of the British Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, has launched his party's Green Manifesto, highlighting some of his plans to tackle the climate emergency. Speaking in Southampton, Corbyn pledged a green industrial revolution to create 1 million new skilled green jobs, 10 new national parks, and 2 billion trees planted by 2040.
Bringing our carbon emissions down to net zero won't happen by itself. It will only be possible with massive public investment in renewable energy and green technology. So a Labour government will bring about a green industrial revolution, creating 1 million new skilled green jobs. 1 million jobs, from building wind turbines to insulating homes to reforesting our wonderful countryside, to manufacturing new electric vehicles. Our green industrial revolution will benefit working class communities with more rewarding, well-paid, cheaper energy bills for everyone and new opportunities in parts of our country that have been held back for far too long. Because too often people are made to feel like the cost of saving the planet falls on them, while the wealthy can fly about in private jets and heat their empty mansions. Well, we're going to change that.
Tensions between China and the United States have just gone a lot worse. Beijing called the ratification of the so-called Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Law an absolute abomination and promised reciprocal action.
The Chinese government says it will take firm countermeasures after the US President Donald Trump signed off on a law that supports the violent protests that have brought chaos to Hong Kong for the last 6 months. It called the law a grave act of interference.
This law is a serious interference in the affairs of Hong Kong, which are the domestic concerns of China. The Chinese government and people firmly oppose such hegemonic behavior, and we urge the United States to abandon this mistaken path. Otherwise, we will take countermeasures, and the United States will have to bear the consequences.
For the Chinese authorities, the US law has nothing to do with human rights or democracy. Rather, it aims to foster anti-Chinese and separatist feelings in the territory.
This law openly supports violent criminals who have destroyed and burnt buildings, attacked innocent civilians, trampled on the rule of law, and put in danger the social fabric in Hong Kong. Its aim is to undermine the stability and prosperity of Hong Kong, the principle of one country, two systems, and to block efforts to reunite the Chinese nation.
The legislation calls for annual evaluations of the autonomy of Hong Kong and threatens sanctions and the suspension of the special economic status given by Washington to the Chinese territory.
I don't understand why the United States is passing a law in Hong Kong. It has nothing to do with them. It is China's business.
Although neither side mentioned it, the passing of this law casts doubts over the future of negotiations to end the trade war between the United States and China.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesorenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo.